There we go. All right, so the topic, just to remind everyone and those that are walking in, this topic with our panel is youth employment as a strategic lever for economic renewal. And I'll start with you, Kershini, Nedbank has done so well, and it's actually the largest contributor to the youth employment services, which is YES, the YES program. So do tell us, how has Nedbank reframed youth employment, not just as a social responsibility? And I think Dr. Nomsa did mention that it's not just the social responsibility that you do just to tick it off, but how have you guys used it as a strategic driver for economic growth in South Africa?
Thank you, Mokoena. It's great to be here with all these young people on the panel. I feel very privileged since we are talking about youth.
Yes.
So I think the first thing to perhaps say is strategically at Nedbank, I just explain it like this, we look at the 4 I's. So the first one is always saying, let's be informed by what's happening in the landscape. Mm-hmm. The next I is about let's be intentional about our strategic choices. The next one is about let's actually implement what we have decided on. And the last one is about impact. Let's measure the impact of what we've done.
Yes.
So basically, I think the business case for youth empowerment is clear. We are all aware that this is the largest global cohort. More than 60% of the SA population are under the age of 35. And unfortunately, more than 60 or 46% of them, according to Stats SA, are unemployed.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's a need to actually wonder why it's not social responsibility. It's obviously surpassed that. So I think from a youth perspective, again, if you look at the landscape and what's happening, even historically, youth have actually been very, very involved in being the architects of a lot of things that have come up, like the Civil Rights Act, yes, voting. If you look at places like Uganda, etc., they were driving things like climate change, mm-hmm, and so on. So I think when one looks at all of that, and just the history as well as the current, youth are a cohort that have to play a role in everything. Youth are also more likely to participate in things like policy making, voting, holding institutions accountable.
Yes.
And for them, they see things like equity, sustainability, and human rights bigger than just profits. Mm-hmm. And I think those are all the things that helped us from a business case perspective. So it wasn't easy, but it was easier to actually put forward why you think youth empowerment is actually so important. So coming back to Nedbank, Nedbank obviously acknowledges that this is a societal issue. Mm-hmm. However, at the same time, our response to it is to use it as a strategic lever for growth. So when one looks at this cohort, they should be consumers. Mm-hmm. They should become taxpayers. They should have purchasing power. Now, you can't have 60% of your population that's not playing on that field.
Yes.
So basically, from our perspective, we take a purpose-led approach to transformation, mm-hmm, and that's really driven by a vision of inclusive prosperity. So what that means is the beneficiaries of transformation, in this case, the youth, we also want them to become leaders of the future. 100%. So we don't just want to give you a handout. We want you to also pay forward, be involved in your communities, and do everything else as well. So from a Nedbank perspective as well, what we try to do is we try to leverage across the 4 capitals when we implement. So we look at human capital, socioeconomic capital, financial capital, and very importantly, leadership capital. Mm-hmm. So through that, we try and balance social and commercial impacts. So when one looks at all of that, strategically now coming to YES, you can see how there's a value fit and a strategic fit with the Youth Employment Services Program. So on YES, YES, as many of you may know, was actually a conversation that started in 2016 through the CEO initiative. So there were 150 CEOs from across the industry that basically went to government and said, we want to assist in trying to address youth unemployment. So the execution of YES only happened from 2019, and Nedbank was a key participant in that. So what would typically happen is your youth will get an opportunity to be on a 12-month program, mm-hmm, in the bank, but what we will also do is you don't only have to be deployed in the bank. You can be deployed through implementation partners as well. And those implementation partners could be strategically in the green economy or digitization or drone technology or whatever it is. So it's a wide spectrum. We also employ them in our call centers, for example.
Yeah.
So when one looks at all of that, there was a key strategic fit. But what we did over and above that is because when one understands where are these youngsters coming from, it's also about their livelihoods. Okay, so we had to also make sure that even though youth are coming into the organization from different perspectives, so you get people on the CA grad program, you get people on the quants program, and so on, and then you get the Yes Youth, but all of them are the same cohort. So we had to make sure that they all land with the same feeling in the bank.
Yes.
So we then also tried to do other things like wraparound support, look at their livelihoods, and made sure that they could also pay their expenses. Because I can't just give you a job and a stipend if you cannot get transport, or if all you're doing is spending your money on transport.
Yeah.
And what's been great about the program when I talk about impact, so to date, we have supported, since inception in 2019, we've supported more than 17,000 youth on this program. And the Yes Office will tell you that when any of these Yes Youth go on this program, their chances of getting employment is 7 times higher.
Wow.
So it's a real, impactful program. Also, we've plowed back 930 million into the economy, and the Yes Youth are more than 60% female, and more than 85% are actually coming from grant-led households. So again, the impact is very, very, so when you talk, strategic lever for growth, you can see how the funds are flowing in the economy.
Yeah.
So obviously, over and above that, what we do as a bank, because it's our responsibility, looking at financial inclusion. So it's not just inclusion, it's financial literacy, then it's financial inclusion, then it's financial participation. So we're not just going to give you a loan. It has to be responsible lending. So we will give you a student loan, but then teach you how to save, teach you how to manage your money, and all of those things. So it's really a holistic solution that comes through Yes. And just for information for everybody else, Yes itself is one of the biggest partnerships in which is private sector led. To date, more than 200,000 youth have been empowered through, I think it's more than 1,890 corporates, and they've plowed back more than 11 billion into the economy. So I think it's really a fantastic program and an example of what can be scalable.
Yes.
Obviously, you got to put effort into it and make sure that the youth are also tracked, once the program has ended. And then I think just from a Nedbank perspective, just a couple of other examples of what we do. So our youth empowerment, well, we don't call it a youth empowerment strategy. We call it a young talent strategy, and that's also deliberate. So our young talent strategy straddles across multiple dimensions, and we implement through multiple vehicles. So it's through the normal graduate programs, internships, the bursaries. We use Yes as well. We also do entrepreneurship, either through enterprise development or through incubators. So we have partnerships with like the Township Economy Alliance, and so on. We also have our community trust, which disperses funds in the tertiary education space, and I'm also a trustee on that trust. So there we've deliberately empowered data scientists, 100% placement rate. We've deliberately worked with Green Matter, and we empower students who want to study in things like biodiversity, climate change, and by the way, we're also learning on this.
Yeah.
They always say, you're never too young to lead and you're never too old to learn.
Yeah.
So it's quite interesting how we sort of complement those two areas, like I'm saying, with all the youngsters on the panel right now. So basically, I think our strategy is quite broad, but I think it's very, very intentional in everything we're doing. So even if there's an incubator, we look at the impact, we look at the success rate on our social economic development, because through there's also a lot of programs in skills development, youth empowerment, and so on. We also measure what we call social return on investment.
Yes.
So we look at, for every 1 rand that you spend, how much do you get? That's a financial metric. But then also, if the guys are, let's say, in the waste economy, we look at how much has actually been recycled.
Yeah.
So it's a very, very great initiative when you look at, all the impacts that's there, because I think it speaks for itself. And then perhaps just to close, a lot of progress has obviously been made from our perspective, but we are not blind to the fact that more work needs to be done. So I think we have put purpose into practice, but now it's almost like a call to action as well.
Yes.
For everybody else to also come to the party, because if we leave this cohort behind, we are not necessarily going to progress as an economy.
That's
I mean, if you think about it like this, youth not only will set the pace, they currently are setting the pace for the development of our nation.
That's true.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was such a comprehensive just answer, especially with what Nedbank is doing. And a part of that, you mentioned the 4 I's. And Farai, I'm going to come to you now with the last I in the 4 I's that she mentioned is that it's impact, right? And the impact, obviously, we were looking for a positive impact. So now how can businesses then start to design structured pathways such as internships, such as apprenticeships, as well as learnerships that lead to that positive impact as well as sustainable employment?
Super, thank you so much. I think for a long time, the belief was that it's government's role to solve youth unemployment. But the reality is that it's everyone's role to solve youth unemployment. And data shows us that the private sector is the employer of 80% of populations in developing countries. This means that the private sector can't be a passive bystander, but private sector have to be actively involved in what it means to transition young people from learning to earning. And in our country, there are a lot of initiatives that are taking place, but we're still not getting something right, and I think there's still a lot to be done in how we coordinate. Harambee tells us that every year, an estimated 1 million young people will leave matric. From the 1 million that leave, 20% of them would find employment or go into tertiary education immediately. From that, there's another 20% who would sort of circle their way through going from internship to learnership to YES program to another internship. But then 60% of those young people never find employment.
Wow.
So they become our disenfranchised work seekers. They become young people who are so reliant on government for grants, for provision, for assistance. They become young people who, because of a lack of opportunity, would turn to a lot of social ills that we see in our country. So the reality is that youth employment is not charity, and I think the previous speaker had mentioned it so well. It's an economic imperative. So what can private sector do? And we speak now about having structured pathways, and Nedbank, I worked with them when I was at YES, has done such a great job in terms of how to do that. I think too often corporates would say, we need to employ these young people, let's put them onto a learnership, an internship, a YES program, but so what? Because for a lot of young people, they complete these programs and they're unemployed all over again. I had a youth who I worked with when I was at the Orem Institute 8 years ago, contacted me saying, Farai, I've been unemployed for a year. This is a young person who is incredibly bright and talented, and now she can't find any opportunity. So where I think we can get better is in terms of ensuring that when we speak of absorption, which is how many young people you take on following a program, it shouldn't just be a tick box exercise. From a BE perspective, from a YES perspective, it's to get your level 1 up, it's 2.5%, to get your 2 levels up, it's 5%, but surely there has to be more than that. From a cohort of 100 young people, you cannot absorb 3 young people and say, we've done our bit. The rest of the 97 must find their way. And I think often, if we're being honest, that's what we do. And that's why young people have so much distrust in various programs that exist today. How I think we can be better as corporates is to say, all right, these are our youth cohorts. One, how do we make the program holistic? And I agree with the previous speaker, it's not about T. It's about, here's a young person, they're coming into the workplace. How do we create structured pathways where they can learn? But 2, how do we not assume that they know? I've worked with so many young people where it's their first job. They didn't know that you have to be at work before your boss gets there. They didn't know that your hair can't be all sorts of colors unless it's your company policy. They didn't know that when you go on your lunch break, really stretching it that full hour, people may frown upon you. You know, they didn't know these unspoken rules in corporate because we don't induct young people on this. And then we let them go saying they're not achievers, but have we really equipped them with the tools and skills to be achievers? So we need to be very holistic in our programs. I love what Nedbank does in terms of providing young people with transport money. Harambee on SA Youth would ensure that you don't get a job that is more than 2 taxis away from where you stay, because then that defeats the purpose of having that employment. And so, 1, it's about having structured pathways, having holistic pathways, but having better absorption opportunities. I know from a corporate perspective, it's difficult when you do a program to absorb all 100 of the young people. But how about saying we'll absorb 15 of these young people, the remaining 85, let's actively reach out into our partner networks and send and distribute these CVs of young people that were in our company that are exceptional, who need their next step.
Yeah.
And I think that as corporates, we must put in a lot more opportunities to get young people connected to what these next steps look like.
Yeah.
Because I think that is the missing link. Young people are frustrated because every day there's another training program, every day there's another learnership or internship. But how does that translate into me being able to support my family and not having gaps in my career because it was a short-term stint?
Thank you so much, Farai. Kekeletso, we're just going to jump on to what Farai has said. A very, very scary statistic that our young people will go from one internship, go to another learnership, and about 60% of those just fall out and go back into unemployment. So do tell us, like, what is the root causes of the disconnect between young people's skills as well as the needs of the employers? Why do we find that 60% now goes back into unemployment?
I think Farai touched at a very important point around upskilling the people, right? So I work a lot with university career services. So one of it is these work readiness programs. So to avoid youth being unemployed is teaching them what professionalism is, and all the softer skills in terms of resilience, in terms of commercial awareness. So if you're going to operate in a particular industry, I'm in the law space, so you need to be commercially aware, and what that means is how to apply the law. So you might know the theory, but you need to know how to apply the law. And for you to know that is reading in that industry, what's happening in that industry. You might get the degree, and then you get in an interview with the likes of myself, and we're going to test how do you know how to practice the law, right? You might know the theory part of it, but as how do you need to practice the law. And then the other part is ensuring that I was privileged enough to run a year's program in one of the law firms that I worked with previously, and part of it was to put people and give them substantive work, right? Mm-hmm. So there's simulated programs, and then these programs that give you exposure to real work. So they'll disperse the learners into marketing or different areas where they specialize in terms of their degrees. And then from there, for them to be employable is just giving them those softer skills.
Yeah.
This is a very underrated thing, because in our careers, most of the things that you learn by failing, right? Mm-hmm. And part of it is teaching them those softer skills, the networking skills, being able to show up at work, right? And with Gen Zs, there's a lot more of mental health awareness also, is being educated in that and giving them the tools and the skills to ensure that they thrive in these environments, because there's an expectation from business, right, to deliver. So it's just providing those programs that are put in place. And at our firm, we train youth from high school. So we invest in them. We're in a journey with them from high school. So we partner with a couple of SSPs and other schools where we nurture that talent from high school, all the way, we give them bursary all the way to university.
Yeah.
And we have a relationship with them as they are transitioning. When they become students, there's a buddy system that we've invented with our signed candidates that's going to come in the following years. We partner with them, and then we teach them the way of how to conduct yourself in a professional environment and so forth. So there's multiple programs to supplement these gaps and to avoid the gap of unemployment, because part of it is access to information. Lack of information is also a key part of why we have unemployed youth.
Mvelo, Kekeletso speaks of a lack of information, as well as he speaks on soft skills that need to be taught to young graduates, whether they're coming from high school or coming from university. So now, how can companies now start to leverage technology and digital learning platforms so that they are equipping young South Africans so that they have the future skills that are demanded by the workplace?
Right. Before I start, I think I just want to give their flowers. I think everyone here has interacted with them or partnered with them in any shape or form to drive impact. I think that's really fantastic work for the team that's here. I've been in the technology space for almost 10 years now. And, we've built systems. I've interacted systems, I've designed systems. And one thing that I'll always say is that technology is used as a tool to help you solve a challenge. right? It should never be the solution to any one problem that you're trying to solve for. So I think when companies then look at technology, they shouldn't necessarily look at it as saying, we're going to use this to solve whatever problem that we have with the youth. We're going to use this tool to this is the tool that's going to upskill these youth in the way that we need, but rather looking at the benefits that technology can actually provide for them in actually reaching that outcome. So I think when you look at technology, first of all, it helps in terms of accessibility.
Yeah.
So for a lot of companies, when they try train youth or they try train the new entrants in the company, they always have this problem of who's going to train them, how much time are they going to spend actually out of office and not doing the actual work they're employed to do, and where's that time going to be made up? So the fact that the technology or the platforms that are out there, like Moodle, the platforms that we've built as well, they're there to almost allow that person to access that platform and that learning and that teaching at any given point in time. Be it bite-sized during the course of the day, maybe during their lunch break, maybe they're given an hour at some point during the week, or even sometimes when they go home and actually do the training itself. So it allows them to be more flexible and to allow them to give this access to this training to these learners in a way that works both for the company itself, but also works for the learner or for the youth. So in terms of what youth really want these days as well is that flexibility. They want things on demand. They want things that fit in their lifestyle as well. And technology really does allow that. And I think the last thing that I want to touch on then is the capabilities that we have then with technology to reinforce learning. So a lot of the time you'll have like a workshop happening, let's say in a company, you'll spend 1 day, 2 days, and it will just be a workshop. People will get pamphlets and then they'll walk away. They'll forget everything that they learned during those 2 days, and then it was just a tick box exercise, and there was no impact that came from it. But because of how certain learning platforms are set up, where now we're seeing the introduction of things like adaptive learning, now we're seeing the tools, such as AI being brought in to help reinforce certain things, to help us pick up where somebody isn't actually figuring out what is being taught to them and help to reinforce and to retrain them in that specific thing. I don't know if anyone has actually tried to learn on Duolingo, for example.
Yeah.
Duolingo, I think it was a very elementary version of this, before AI was introduced so widespread, where you'd go through the training, the theory, and then you'd go through the testing.
Yes.
And if you'd get things right, you'd get things wrong. It wouldn't necessarily say, it will tell you, okay, you got this wrong, but it would bring those things that you failed in later lessons as well, to make sure that it reinforces and you actually end up being competent at the end of the day. So that's one of the benefits that technology does bring. And then, of course, from a scalability perspective, you can train 1,000 people, on one system, and they could be spread across geographically anywhere in the world.
Fantastic. I think throughout yesterday, what it was mentioned, today is also mentioned, Kekeletso also touched on it just a bit, the idea of allowing failure just to be part of the process of learning rather than using it as a punishment. And just to touch on that just a little bit, what can we do when it comes to mindset shifts that employers can start to view youth as not as just inexperienced risks, because a lot of times the JD comes out and we're asking for 5 years experience for a graduate that just came right out of university, and rather viewing them as those inexperienced risks, how can we look at them as untapped assets so that we have fresh perspectives as well as digital fluency? And anyone can take this one.
I can share my story briefly. So weirdly enough, I studied accounting at Stellenbosch. And then after that, I started working for Deloitte. But when I was there, I realized that I was doing what my parents wanted me to do, but not what I really wanted to do. And if anyone knows about Zimbabwean dads, it's either accounting, medicine, or law. And so I got an opportunity to do my master's abroad. And then when I got back, I was unemployed. And I thought, because I went to this UK university, I'll find a job easily.
Yeah.
And that taught me the difficulty of what the employment situation is like in South Africa. I then had an English teacher who told me about this great role at this renowned healthcare institution in South Africa. I went for a conversation with the CEO, and he hired me as a junior project manager. Note, I didn't have project management experience, no PMP qualification, but he saw the potential that I had to add value. Since then, my career has skyrocketed, and I went from working at the Aurum Institute to Yes, to Accenture, and I've just started a role at Canva. And all of these roles, I don't think I've met any of the criteria to the T, but people that interviewed me saw the potential that I had.
Yeah.
And I wish that more employers would give young people that opportunity, because at age 30 now, I'm seeing what trust and belief in someone looks like and how can I play it forward. So my call to action to all of you today is the mindset is don't look at young people as these self-centered youth that don't have any value to add. We are brilliant if you give us the opportunity, and we'll prove that to you if you give us a chance.
Farai, that is such an incredible story. And I think the fact that you even got the interview. So now I want to just track it back just a little bit from you got the interview, they got to meet you, they got to interact with you and started to see that you do have the skills that they could actually help you with. But then let's look at it from a CV point of view. So now from a CV, I don't have the qualifications that you're asking for, but I do have some other skills. How can we now as HR professionals start to look at that as, okay, this might be someone that could, add some value, and I could just bring it to anyone.
Yeah, I think I can take that one. I think there's a lot of that. So because I spend a lot of time with universities, and this is the most brought up question as to how do I present myself, because your CV speaks to us before we even call you for an interview, right? And I think the most important thing is no experience is not relevant. Like for me, I started as a receptionist, for instance.
Wow.
I can share the same sentiment with Farai, where someone took interest in my profile. It's how I conducted that profile. There was no grammar. You go back to basics, right? So has to be well presented, has to be put together well. And that speaks to me as a recruiter, if I'm viewing that CV, to say this person took time and effort to ensure that, the CV was done well. And the cover letter that, they would have done research into the company, what that company does. Maybe they wrote articles, the company had deals that they had, and that evoked them to want to apply there. I think it's the approach more than anything that gets you that interview. So and it goes back to the same thing, being knowledgeable in where you want to go, right? And once you have that, that's where the potential will speak to whoever is sitting in that room.
Absolutely love that. So for all of you, just going to ask you just quite briefly, maybe in a sentence or two, just to close it off. We're looking now toward 2030. What would a thriving youth-powered economy look like? And what must we do today to make that vision a reality? Quite briefly, from each of you, I'll start right here.
Yeah, I'm a pragmatist. So if you're looking at 2030, okay, and if you assume that in an average year, there's 250 working days, that means we have no more than 1,500 days to make something happen by 2030. So I would not suggest that we go and come up with another strategy or something else, because it'll take up half of that time.
Yeah.
So there are already initiatives that are working, and I think everyone can actually start today. Pick something. There's the National Youth Policy that's already there between, even if it still says draft, between 2020 to 2030. There's Harambe, there's multiple initiatives. So we just got to basically continue to scale up is what I would suggest.
All
Thanks.
Farai?
Yeah, I'd say that for us to achieve economically empowered youth by 2030, it takes us, one, exactly what you just said, leveraging what currently exists. But two, I think collaborating a lot more. I think that so often we've got siloed training programs, but the industry is the industry. How are we building a workforce that is fit for the future of X industry.
Exactly.
I think the third and last thing is also just taking a chance on young people. Young people, I mean, Africa's got the youngest youth population in the world, and 60% of us right now are not employed. And if we don't change that, we're sitting on a ticking time bomb. So take a chance on young people, and you'd be amazed at what they can do.
Fantastic. Kekeletso?
I think just to wrap up, and I agree with both of you guys on that point. I'd speak on mentorship. I think I am where I am because of mentorship. I'd say more of that, and then I'd say, growth mindset, continuously learn. I mean, at my age right now, which I'm 30, I started a degree and my elective is in digital transformation. So that continuous learning, I think that would be, just to wrap up on what both my esteemed panelists have said. So I think continuous learning and mentorship. The people that have walked the path, they can, transfer or embed certain skills in you to succeed in whatever you want to do.
All right, fantastic. Mvelo?
All right. For me, I think we really need to, put our heads together to figure out what kind of population of youth we're trying to have.
Yeah.
In my opinion, we should strive for globally competitive talent pool of youth, and not just filling the needs that we have as businesses here today, but where these youth can actually help us as companies also compete on a global stage. So if anyone is, in a position where they are in a skills development or in control of that kind of budget as well in their business, to really take that role seriously and to not look at it as a tick box exercise, but rather to see what are the outcomes that we're trying to achieve with this program, how we're actually equipping these youth to be these globally competitive citizens in the world, so that we as a country can also just thrive off the back of that.
All right, thank you very much. And that is our conversation. You heard it from the young people themselves. So I do think that it is... No, I'll count you as well. Don't count yourself out. Don't count yourself out at all. But you heard it from the young people themselves. And I really do think there's some great points that have been made. So thank you very much for joining us. We'll just have our next panel. So thank you.
Thank you.